Hello, and welcome to Cosmic Dream Sanctuary. This is a presentation in the series on finding missing time. It is a review of the phenomenology and evidence for UFO or UAP associated missing time, especially with regards to hypnotic regression. My name is Daniel, and I have a bachelor's degree in the Western Liberal Arts from St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, master's degree in East-West Psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies. I hold a certificate in hypnotherapy in the spiritual counseling modality of depth hypnosis. I'm certified in Beyond Quantum Healing, and I'm ordained as a minister in the Universal Life Church. So these are all the credentials for my education and training that I am utilizing today in this presentation of both scholarly review as well as some of my own experiences associated with missing time. So I'm going to offer a new hypothesis, and that hypothesis involves missing time and hypnosis. Don't worry if you don't know exactly what missing time or hypnosis is. We'll cover the definitions. I'll go over missing time phenomenology. This is all about what the phenomenon we are dealing with is. So we're going to go through lists of indicators of description of the experience. Then we're going to look at the evidence for missing time. So what are the types of evidence that we use to talk about missing time, to make the conclusions that we do? We're going to analyze the existing state of the published public body of hypnotic testimony associated with missing time. And then we're going to examine what I'm looking for or calling is concurrent documentation, meaning what are the documentation sources that we have that are happening at the same time about a missing time event, and then we'll come to some conclusions. So why is this important? Why is this important? And it turns out that many people are experiencing the phenomena or seeing UFOs, things like that. From dream studies perspective, we know about 6.5% of people have dreams of extraterrestrial contact. And in these presentations, you'll discover that ET contact is frequently misremembered or understood as a nocturnal dream. So this means that there is probably a huge body of experience that may actually be missing time or UFO encounters or something like that that is misremembered because of the issues that are surrounding the epistemology and how we speak about these things. The UFO, UAP, and extraterrestrial and non-human intelligence contact phenomena is very important. This is the most important thing that's happening in the world today, primarily because it is bringing us into a new worldview, a worldview where it is possible to have craft that move in extraordinary ways that relate to energy systems, that utilize psychic phenomena and things like that. Another thing, reason why this is important is our collective understanding of ET contact is based upon media narratives from a very small number of case studies and from poorly understood hypnotic processes. So this is really important to know. So we've got this huge phenomena, the UFO phenomena. ET contact is very important. It could reveal a new order of technologies, a new understanding of our world and our place in the world. But our understanding from a collective point of view is based in these nightmarish images of abduction, of genetic harvest, of being out of control, of aggression and things like that. And so the reason why I'm doing this inquiry is to say, hey, we're actually basing most of our media narrative and much of our understanding of ET contact on a very small number of case studies. It's about 266 as I count them. And these are derived from very poorly understood hypnotic processes, and you'll see why coming up. So it's important that we examine this and get this right, because we can no longer make the assumption that ET contact is something that is not remembered because of repressed memories that might involve such humiliating and vulnerable experiences as what has been described as abduction. Another reason why this is very important is it might bridge quantum physics and transpersonal psychology. So this is domains of our both psychology and physics that are at the edge, they're at the fringe. We've studied these phenomena. We don't really understand what's going on. Like, for example, we know with quantum physics that things can be particles or waves, and that conscious observation of these things collapses it from wave possibility into a particular expression, right? That's really weird, and we'll talk about that at a different talk. In transpersonal psychology, we know that things like telepathy and psi phenomena, parapsychology, all these things are actually real, although not well understood. So this domain of missing time and understanding missing time actually might bridge those two. And it is important also because hypnotic testimony itself is meaningful in non-dual ways of knowing, but is often misunderstood as an objective way of knowing. So that is that's very important to understand. We might discount hypnotic testimony because it's not historic or is questionable or something like that. But the fact is that people go to hypnotists to deal with abduction or ET contact experiences that are not understood or not remembered or not integrated. People are seeking help, and hypnotists are providing that help in ways that may or may not be ethical or effective. And so that one of the reasons why this inquiry is important is because we need to understand what might be happening in the missing time experience, what might be happening in the so-called missing time regressions, and what are the implications of those things. And so it's important as well because we need to bring our understanding of the phenomena, we need to engage it in integral ways. So, for example, when we look to the recent congressional hearings on UAPs, they said, no, we don't want to look at narrative data. We don't want to look at anecdotal data. We want to look at sensor data. And that's only one side of the coin. The other side is the psychical, the psychological side of these things. And the only way we can get to an understanding of those is through narrative testimony. And oftentimes, the only way we get to narrative testimony is through something like hypnosis. And so even though there are challenges in our epistemology, I say we need to shift how we think and talk about hypnosis and missing time, because hypnosis is a fact, missing time is a fact. This is a thing people are doing. So let's now shift our understanding from this is a revelation of objective historic fact that is on par with sensor data. No, it's not. It's not memory enhancement. It's nothing like that. But it is something else. And so that's one of the reasons why we need to explore this, so that we can bring in the narrative, the psychological, the transpersonal, and even the quantum realms into this dialogue. So I'm going to offer a new hypothesis. And the hypothesis is relatively simple. You can think of it as everything is a dream. Dream is dreamlike, life is dreamlike, abduction is dreamlike, missing time is dreamlike, hypnosis is dreamlike. And I'll talk about that particularly around the qualities of dreams in a separate talk. But it's important for you to know that this is the hypothesis I am putting forward. So abduction experience is dreamlike in nature. And I say that because ET contact is highly strange in the same way that REM dreams are highly bizarre. And they'll often use the same sort of descriptions of these kind of bilocations, weird behaviors, teleportations, psychic communications, and things like that. It's very similar in terms of the description of events. In addition, the abduction phenomena involves high similarities to other sleep and dream phenomena. And I'm not saying it's just a dream. I'm saying it is physiologically similar to phenomena like sleep paralysis, lucid dreams, and out-of-body experience. And so we might even understand that we can interpret abduction experience content like we might interpret dream content, knowing that dream content may actually have some sort of objective correlate, especially in the cases of like exotic dreaming, telepathic dreaming, or out-of-body experience dreaming. So it's not pushing aside the reality, it's exploring it as it is. So the missing time experience might be dreamlike. So is dreamlike in nature is what I'm saying. And one of the reasons why I say this is because the missing time experience is actually very, very, very common in terms of every night you go to sleep, you have 8 hours of sleep or so. You may remember a sense of something, but you don't know what happens. If you then work with that intuition and memory, you start to define what happened in the dream a little bit more. Maybe you remember more. Maybe you relive it. It's very, very similar to the process we use in terms of relating to missing time experience. The only thing that's different between our normal sleep patterns and dream patterns and missing time is the time and place, the contents, that what people are saying, they say. It's not just like any other dream. And that's one of the things that we see in terms of how dreams unfold is sometimes there are big dreams and small dreams, sometimes there's psionic dreams, sometimes there's wish fulfillment dreams. This may be a special type of dream experience. Like waking life also may be a special type of dream experience. So in this way, missing time associated with UFOs and UAPs may not be repressed memory at all. So that's important to note. Hypnotic experience as well is dreamlike in nature. Literally, quite literally, it is defined as something like a dream. So this is what's happening. So it's all important to say that all of these things are dreamlike. However, dreams are psionic in nature, meaning they are telepathic, that you can share them, that they're precognitive, that they exhibit these weird, highly strange qualities that we associate with extraterrestrials and UFO phenomena. Dreams are also shown to mediate the human and non-human world. And this is a hallmark of dreams within a shamanic culture and a shamanic dreaming culture. And that is generally a culture that has not been touched by the empires of colonialism. Dreams are also seen to define reality. And so that means definition of worldview. So we use dreams to define worldview. And if you need examples of that, please just look at Rene Descartes' dreams that led to the scientific method, right? Those dreams literally defined our reality. The same thing goes for historic dreams that have influenced leaders before battles or making political decisions. They've had dreams and interactions with non-human intelligences that help them make the right decision. And dreams are ontologically complex, meaning we don't know what they are. It's hard to speak about. They may be objective, they might be subjective, they might be non-dual in some way. And so that's really important to note. So it's not just a dream. We're saying something is happening here that's dreamlike in nature that may have implications that are entirely vast. So therefore, we are dealing with a narrative-based and non-dual way of knowing. We're not dealing with objective and historic ways of knowing. It's narrative and non-dual, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Objective conclusions regarding memory and historic events require evidence outside of the narrative testimony of hypnosis. So that's one of these conclusions, is unless we can establish the orientation of the dream along certain spectrums of ontology, right? Is it objective? Is it subjective? Is it real in a way of being like a physical thing? Is it real like an archetype? Unless we can establish that orientation around multiple dimensions of meaning, we cannot make objective and historical conclusions based on hypnotic testimony. And that's really important to know. And that's really important to know going into this review of evidence. So something very real is happening, and it is very important, but it must be treated like a dream. So all of these testimonies, all of this information, all of this stuff coming from the abduction lore that's based in hypnotic testimony needs to be understood like a dream. And we need to understand the role of dreaming in culture and the world. That's one of the conclusions of this talk. We don't understand it in the Western materialist point of view. There's something very real and powerful and magical happening in the dream world. So I want to talk a little bit about theories of missing time, especially in relationship with UFOs, UAPs, and extraterrestrial contact. Most of the time we imagine that missing time is caused by a repression of trauma, mind control, ontological shock, or transcendent experience. And most of the time, actually, the understanding is that the event associated with missing time was so traumatic that it was repressed in the subconscious. And that's where we get the associations of like sexual abuse, repression, that sort of thing with the regression therapy model, is because there's an assumption that we repress traumatic events below consciousness into the subconscious. And this is a very Freudian psychoanalytic understanding where you see everything as a complex of wounding, right? So this is a worldview. We're imposing a worldview now based upon the repression of trauma. And we know that that actually does happen, but in terms of relating to the missing time experience, that is simply a hypothesis. It's simply a hypothesis because we do not have concurrent documentation or evidence except tangential sort of stuff related to the missing time experience. Another theory is alien mind control. Alien mind control. So the idea is the extraterrestrials took you to some place, their ship. They performed procedures on you, and then they wiped your memory. And this is like the idea from the movie Men in Black. They have this device that can wipe your memory. And so in that way, there's something that is controlling your mind, right? And so that's a theory as to what's happening. So in the case of hypnosis, we're using hypnosis to either create a scenario where repression of trauma can be relieved, perhaps through living of those traumatic events, through some sort of cathartic process, through the suggestions you're safe, that sort of thing. Also, with the alien mind control theory, the idea is that hypnosis is sort of working against the whatever conditioning or control that is happening. Another theory, and one that I actually really prefer, is ontological shock. Ontological shock is a term from Dr. John Mack. It refers to ontology, which refers to our understanding of the beingness of the world. And so we have this ontology, right? This worldview where we think we're the pinnacle of society, that historic space-time is all there is, that we're alone in the universe. And then you have these experiences that are so different than what your consensus reality worldview is. You can't process it, you can't integrate it. And actually, we see some cases where, if you don't have a word for a specific color or type of snow, like certain tribes do, you won't actually see those things. And it doesn't arise in your consciousness unless you actually have a predefined concept of those things. So that when you learn the different words for the gradients of snow or color, you're then able to perceive them much quicker. And in that way, we kind of assume that we're not perceiving or integrating the perceptions of non-human intelligences or UFOs, UAPs, because our ontology of the world doesn't include them. And so it's a psychological ordeal actually is involved with ontological shock because you're shifting worldviews, definition of self and world. That actually, so in terms of hypnosis, the situation there is to work with the subconscious mind around the definition of worldview to mediate that experience and help massage the shifting of ontologies and integration of experience from a limited worldview to a more expansive worldview. And that the hypnosis is operative because it creates a scenario of suggestion and relaxation of the conscious mind to allow for that to happen. Finally, I would put forward the theory that there is some level of transcendent experience happening within the missing time experience itself, meaning that the experience exists outside of historic space-time, outside of the body in some way. It is a realm of spirit or mind or something like that. And in that way, physical memories may not actually be encoded in the brain, and therefore it's not remembered. So that's a hypothesis I'm putting forward, primarily because we are dealing with UFOs and things that seem to be time traveling and space traveling and highly strange in these quantum ways, and therefore we can expect that the experience may exist outside of consensus reality, 3D space-time. So the theories of hypnosis associated with this are memory enhancement, and that's the most popular theory by far, is that hypnosis creates a situation of memory enhancement. And so in this way, we're understanding that the process of hypnosis working with missing time is generating testimonial evidence about a historic event, something like that. There's issues around this because it is problematic actually in the same way investigations of psi phenomena are problematic. There's something happening. It seems to be true. There's ways that it verifies, like extraordinary experiences verify the capacity of hypnosis to enhance memory. Like there's cases where that does actually happen in the same way that there's cases where psychics can see where like a kidnapped victim was taken. So in that way, forensic investigations sometimes use psychics. They sometimes use hypnosis, but it's understood that it's not necessarily repeatable. So there's a significant effect that is generally weak and not repeatable in a way. And so it's sort of like the last-ditch effort of forensic investigations. So there's this whole complex, there's this whole issue around false memory syndrome, and that is the understanding that hypnosis has been used to create false memories, and there's issues associated with this primarily in association with convicting people about crimes based on testimony derived from hypnosis. And there has been significant study around this to the degree that most courts of law do not accept hypnosis testimony alone as evidence. So the memory enhancement theory or hypothesis really does need to just be set aside. It might be happening in special cases in the same way that psionic stuff and visionary experiences do happen, but it is not a 3D repeatable thing. So that's really important to know. Another theory is around the regression or the reliving of events for the sake of healing, such as through catharsis, the principle of catharsis, which is really this sort of, wow, the emotions of that time came up and then you feel released from that experience. It's like watching a tragedy. It's emotionally impactful, and then there's some sort of resolution at the end of it. So the understanding here is that there's a regression that happens to an experience, generally understood to be a negative abduction that has caused a repression, but rather than enhancing memory, right, directly and by way of suggestion, this is reliving that experience for the purpose of catharsis. And that's slightly different than memory enhancement because there's a healing element. This is the operative principle in terms of past life regression. Past life regression assumes that there was a historic life in the past and that bringing forward acknowledgement and re-experiencing the emotions and integrating that into the consciousness produces a sense of healing and catharsis for the individual. Another hypothesis of hypnosis is that it relaxes the boundary in general and relaxes the sensor. So understanding that the conscious mind censors subconscious things because it sometimes doesn't have concepts for it, because it is contrary to images of self, that sort of thing. It says, no, that can't happen because I believe we're alone in the universe or something like that. So in that way, hypnosis can relax the boundaries of the egoic persona mind and open up to transpersonal realms of experience. So I need to put forward my hypothesis here. My hypothesis here is that hypnosis is a dream experience. It is not actually memory enhancement. So hypnosis is the intentional incubation of a dream state. And I say that because dream states are really defined on spectrums from waking to sleeping, to night dreams, to daydreams, to hallucinations, to a variety of recalls. So in that way, we're dealing with imaginal experiences. And it's a special case of a dream state, but it's special case in the same way that out-of-body experience perhaps is, psionic dreaming is, shared dreaming, precognitive dreaming, that sort of thing. It does not deal directly with memory. So dream states do not deal directly with memory. They may involve memory, but you wouldn't say every night you have a dream, you're remembering something, right? Sometimes you might have a dream that reminds you of something, and sometimes you might actually be in that specific memory in some way. And that's something that you, as the dreamer or experiencer, have to go through a process of discernment with your feelings, intuition, and emotion to even make a statement on. So the hypnosis state directly deals with non-dual states of awareness. So we're talking about non-dual, meaning it is neither objective or subjective, but somewhere exists in that spectrum. And so oftentimes you might have a wish fulfillment dream within yourself, and that's a highly subjective experience. Sometimes you might have a very objective type of dream experience where it involves other people that you can corroborate experience with, and that I would say is objective, even though it's not physical, that sort of thing. It also deals with non-dual states of awareness, meaning the self and other. So the work between the hypnotist and hypnotee happens in a non-dual state of consciousness, rather than as it happens in a transpersonal realm, rather than as my persona and your persona working together to deduce a historic transcript of a historic event. Something is happening that is non-dual, that's even non-conceptual, but is meaningful in some way, similar to dreams. So the hypnosis does and can induce a dream state, which in dreams are known to be psionic in nature, meaning shared dreams, that sort of thing, telepathic dreams. They're known to mediate the human and non-human realms. So that's how dreams have been used traditionally in intact and shamanic cultures, is that they mediate the human and non-human realms. And finally, they define, in part, our consensus reality. So our understanding of the world, our discoveries, guidance around historic events really do arise out of dream space. And also the work of dreamers, actually through art, through literature, through communication, actually define consensus reality. And that's shown to happen in our Western culture as well as shamanic dreaming cultures. So the process of hypnosis then offers something like a vision and a journey as a rite of passage, similar to the Asclepian rites. And Asclepius is the ancient Greek god of healing, of medicine, and of dreams. And that's where we get the symbol of the snake going up the staff. But there was a process of incubating dreams for healing, insight, or transformation, and receiving that in some way through the mediation of this non-human intelligence called Asclepius. Right? And it's also very similar to shamanic rites of passage. And we'll talk about that in a different talk, but it's important to note that hypnosis seems to offer something like a rite of passage, which really does correspond with Dr. John Mack's discussion in Passport to the Cosmos. Missing time might be a quantum phenomena. So there is a mutual enactment hypothesis that I would like to talk about. So when we look at the extraordinary field of ET contact and things like that, we see that there are many, many different hypotheses happening. In a paper by Sean Esborn-Hargens through the Exo Studies Institute, the paper is called Our Wild Cosmos. He puts forward a theory that he lists 10 theories. A lot of them have to do with time travelers or extraterrestrials or the Fey realms or something like that. And he says, these are all likely true at some level and are mutually enacting upon one another. So that's really important to understand, that we don't have one single hypothesis. We're not dealing with missing time as an extraterrestrial mind control thing. We're dealing with who knows what. And it can be subjective things becoming objective, archetypes, collective unconscious, fairies, ghosts, whatever, right? It's all sort of working together. Missing time might be something more like a quantum phenomenon. And one thing that really points that out is that it seems to happen in a transcendent realm of experience. So it is outside of our Cartesian space, meaning it's outside of 3 dimensions of space, the 1 dimension of historic time. Somehow it relates to perhaps even time travelers, right? That's one of the big hypothesis, is that these are time travelers. The quantum state deals with energies and probabilities and things like that, and that's very similar to the dream state. It's not well understood until it's observed, that sort of thing. So observation, right? This whole idea of observation and using the quantum physics as a model relies on like the double slit light experiment, the understanding that observation really does have an ontological effect. And I'll talk about this in another paper. But that's one of the things I'm thinking about, is that hypnosis actually is relating to this field of quantum possibility, and it's collapsing it down into particular expressions in some way, shape, or form. And that collapse might actually even have ontological significance through the variety of means that are described in the mutual enactment hypothesis. And therefore, I come to the conclusion that hypnosis is a non-dual event that has objective and ontological significance by way of transpersonal and subjective and intersubjective and collective unconscious sort of expressions, but ultimately it is a non-dual event that has objective ontological significance. So let's talk about the phenomenology of missing time. And phenomenology is all about what is the shape and size and description of these experiences. So I turn to Missing Time, the book by Bud Hopkins, who really put forward this notion of missing time. And I'll simply read this here so you get his description of missing time. A typical abduction account follows one of several basic scenarios. In fact, it is the presence of certain familiar details in what seemed at first to have been only a routine UFO sighting, which alerts the experienced investigator to inquire more deeply into the case. So this is really interesting, right? There's already an understanding that the investigator is part of the phenomenon. For this investigator, a mental red flag goes up if the witness seems confused about an unexplained loss of time or complains of certain physical symptoms. As an example, I shall construct a hypothetical abduction case, a composite of commonly reported details from a number of actual accounts. Let us assume that a young man and his wife and a year-old baby are on a trip, driving late at night on a relatively deserted highway. They see a bright light moving in the sky, and suddenly it approaches their car. They realize after a moment or so that it is not a plane or a helicopter or anything familiar. It is soundless. It moves erratically. It can halt suddenly. It is totally unlike any aircraft they have ever seen before. Now it passes low over their car and seems to disappear behind a stand of trees. Then, unaccountably, their engine stalls as its electrical system fails and they come to a stop. Next, the UFO flies off from a slightly different position from where they had last seen it, and their motor starts up again, seemingly on its own accord. They are bewildered but relieved that things are normal again. What they are not aware of is that it is now 2 hours later. They have all three spent that time inside a landed UFO undergoing some kind of examination. So at this point, this is kind of his deduction as to what happens. Up until this point, the experience of the UFO and things like that might be termed an objective historic event. But from this point on, about talking about what happened in that missing time, this is a dream, and we have to understand it like a dream that may actually have objective significance. But the step between these sentences is a step too great to take, I would say. They have all three spent that time inside a landed UFO undergoing some kind of examination, and their entire experience has been blocked from their conscious memories. Again, this is understanding, this is based on like psychodynamic, psychoanalytic understanding of conscious, unconscious. And that's only one very recent view of psychology. The much longer view of psychology really does come from a shamanic perspective, shamanic dreaming perspective. The events immediately before and immediately after the abduction have been seamlessly joined, leaving them with little or no sense of missing time, right? So something happened, and it's a deduction as to what happened here. So John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist who did wonderful work in this field, put together a list, he mentioned in his book Abduction, a list of things that are indicators of abduction. So memory or of presence or little men, humming or vibratory sensation, instances of being floated, close-up sightings of UFOs, vivid dreams of being taken, awakening paralyzed with dread, memories of friendly playmates or healers, a family history of abduction or sightings, fear triggers and insomnia that are kind of unexplained, and odd marks on the body. He describes the phenomenology. There's an onset phase that may happen in cars, home, or nature. There's a buzzing and humming. There's a feeling of unusual presences. And if at night there's something like a dreamlike consciousness, then there's a transition phase that is oftentimes floating. There's a sense of being accompanied by beings. There's going to a smaller craft, like through a window or through walls or downstairs to a smaller craft that then takes you to something like a mothership. Sometimes he talks about is independent witnessing, which is rare and limited. He identifies that potential witnesses, like partners in the bed, might be switched off, completely asleep, unaccessible, that sort of thing. And he also notes that these experiences sometimes are corroborated by witnesses, other witnesses in town seeing a UFO. So that's very important to note. Then there's inside the ship. He reports a sense of sparse furniture, indirect light, and technical equipment. There are various alien beings performing actions, including reptilian and gray type beings. There are procedures done, generally the abductees undressed. There's samples taken. There's beings that study the captive. There's instruments used to penetrate bodies, and the interactions often involve the concept of energy and vibration. And this is very important to understand. The reports involve the experiencer talking about energy and vibration, which might remind you of the quantum wave state. That's important to remember. So there are information and alterations of consciousness. There is telepathic communications in these experiences. There's imagery of catastrophic events, and also messaging regarding the state of humanity. Then in terms of the return phase, a lot less is remembered than the abduction experience itself. There may be small mistakes in the return, like being in the wrong way in bed, different clothes, on the other side of a locked door, and that actually happens. How did the child get out of a locked room or whatever and is now outside and the doors are locked and they can't reach the lock, that sort of thing. And it might be remembered as a dream or not at all. You might awake with unexplained cuts or lesions, and you may have a sense of tiredness or like undergoing a stressful experience. I want to review some of the other lists I found associated with typical alien abduction experience as expressed in the literature. And this comes from a paper that explores alien abduction literature by the researchers Holden and French. So they point out Gottlieb, Appel, Roediger, and Flamburis in 1994 have the characteristic features of recall of an abduction or encounter with apparently non-human entities, missing time related to recall of unidentified lights, objects, and apparently non-human entities, unusually realistic or emotionally intense dreams or dreamlike experiences of UFOs and apparently non-human entities. So these are all characteristics of alien abduction phenomena. Hopkins, Jacob, and Westrom in 1992 list indicators as waking up paralyzed with a sense of strange figure or figures present. And that's actually an indicator of another phenomenon called sleep paralysis, which is related. There's a sense of missing time. Once again, that is related to dreams. We experience missing time oftentimes when we don't remember our dreams. So the feeling of flying, once again, associated with dreams, seeing balls of lights in one room, and the presence of puzzling scars on one's body. So those are all indicator experiences. Roediger in 1994 as well have a selection criteria for abductees. So the person must be taken against his or her will from the terrestrial surroundings by a non-human being. The being must take the person to an enclosed place, not terrestrial in appearance, assumed to or known to be a spacecraft by the witness. In this place, the person must either be subjugated to an examination, engaged in communication, either verbal or telepathic or both, and these experiences may be remembered consciously or through methods of focused concentration, for example, hypnosis. In David Jacobs' book, A Secret Life, he puts forward indications of abductions, such as the congruence of narrative and richness of exact details, the residue of physical objects, for example, stains on objects, the physical after effects such as scars and bruises, vision problems, muscle pain, nosebleeds, earaches, discharges and vaginal problems, and pregnancy. There's psychological trauma. He calls post-abduction syndrome, such as sleep disturbances, fears, anxieties, depression, and missing time. And then there's psychosexual dysfunction, psychosexual dysfunction. Those are all indications of abduction from David Jacobs, who is notably one of the most negative researchers in the field, and he's seeing all of these physiological effects of abduction. So from Brad STeiger, we've got Dr. Sprinkle, Leo Sprinkle's list from the about common characteristics. So STeiger here is quoting Dr. Sprinkle. Dr. Sprinkle is one of the early hypnosis researchers in abduction. So he says there's an episode of missing time. Under hypnosis, many people remember driving down the road, then being back in their car. They know that something happened between the 2 points of consciousness, but they can't fill in the missing time. They have disturbing dreams. They dream about about flying saucers, being pursued and captured, being examined by doctors in white coats. They have daytime flashbacks of UFO experiences while they're doing tasks in normal everyday activity. They have flashback to some kind of UFO or UFO entity. They have strange compulsions. For example, one man for 7 years felt compelled to dig a well at a particular spot. Under hypnosis, he revealed that a UFO being told him that they would contact him if he dug a well. A sudden interest in UFOs, the abductee may suddenly give evidence of a compulsion to read about UFOs, ancient history, pyramids, and crystals without knowing why. So here's a top 10 list by Fiore in the book Encounters. Top 10, inability to account for periods of time, persistent nightmares and or dreams of UFOs and aliens, sleep disorders, waking up with unusual bodily sensations, appearance of mysterious marks on the body, feeling monitored, watched and or communicated with, repeated sightings of UFOs, vague recollections of close encounters, unexplained healings of ailments or afflictions, reacting with fear of and or anxiety about UFOs and or ETs. So those are all the phenomenological descriptions. Those are some of the abduction indicator lists. And those are popular. You can see those online. People often will cite these subconsciously. When they approach a hypnotist, they will oftentimes list the details that correspond with these lists. Like, I have the dreams, I have the missing time, I have the nosebleeds. I can't make sense of this. Please help me make sense of this. And that's how they approach a hypnotist, is by reference to these lists. That's very important to note. They don't approach a hypnotist saying, I had this experience that doesn't make sense to me. They already have an intuition that they have had so-called abduction or ET contact or something like that. They can't make sense of it, and they think the hypnotist can help them make sense because these lists are there. So this is an example of the ontology shifting, right? So we now have an ontology of experience, what is the beingness of an abduction experience? Well, it has these characteristics. If you have these characteristics, you might have an abduction experience. If you have an abduction experience, you should talk to a hypnotist. That's kind of how it flows. So now let's talk about evidence. So what is the evidence for missing time experience? So in his book, UFOs and Abductions, David Jacobs lists evidence. He sees eyewitness testimony. There's physical marks on abductees' bodies. There's physical traces on the ground. There's photographic evidence of the UFO, UAP, and there's congruence of details from account to account. Again, that congruence of details from account to account is very sparsely, it's a very small sample. If a hypnotist is looking to their own set to find that congruence, that actually the implication here is they are causing that congruence within the set of their hypnotees. And I'm not saying this is malicious. I'm not even saying this is leading question. I'm saying there is a non-dual interaction that happens between hypnotist and hypnotee, and that the hypnotist is actually attracting the clients that want to work with the hypnotist in specific ways, not because they believe they can provide an objective sense of understanding, but because they like that hypnotist's ontological understanding of the phenomena, and they want their infinite possibility of missing time experience to resolve in the way that the hypnotist offers. So that's really important to understand. And so this congruence is not actually evidence whatsoever of, or not directly of, the abduction phenomena. It is evidence of the non-dual interaction between hypnotist and hypnotee. And so let's turn to Dr. John Mack in his book Assumption, who talks about the nature of proof and non-dual interactions. So in this work, as in any clinically sound investigation, the psyche of the investigator, or more accurately, the interactions of psyches of the client and the clinician, is the means of gaining knowledge. But it must then be noted that although we analyze and formulate as objectively as possible afterwards, the original information was obtained non-dualistically, i.e. through the intersubjective unfolding of the investigator-abductee interaction. Thus, experience, the reporting of that experience, and the receiving of that experience through the psyche of the investigator are, in the absence of physical verification or proof, always quite subtle in the abduction phenomena, as will be discussed later, the only way that we can know about abductions. So here he's saying that the non-dual interaction is the only way we can know about abductions. But I'm saying that the interaction between the hypnotist and hypnotee is not one of enhancing memory, nor is it one of reversing repressed memory, but something else is happening. So that's my theory, and that's why it's difficult to find proof of these phenomena, because something else is happening than a historical objective event that we can know about it afterwards in an objective way. I'm saying it's still meaningful. I'm saying that all of these hypnotists have meaningfully contributed, and all of these abductees have meaningfully contributed to our knowledge, but it is non-dual, and we cannot actually bring it into the objective sphere without other means of verification. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing this survey of evidence. So I wanted to put together a list of all of the hypnotic cases associated with abduction that inform our understanding at a media level, at an academic level of abduction. So in this list, I've gone through the most kind of influential, as well as the ones that I found in references and things like that. And I've gone through a lot of the lists and things like that. It's not that many. It's not that many that deal explicitly with the missing time phenomena, abduction phenomena, and ET contact phenomena by way of hypnosis. And these are sort of cases that are publicly available or written about generally in the context of a hypnotist writing about their experience or an academic. And so from 1966 to about 2008, we've had these dozen or so writers produce, their books. And in terms of my estimate, there's about 266 cases. So that this is a very small sample set to establish an understanding about the nature of a phenomena that that is very dreamlike in nature and that may or may not actually have historic objective significance and might actually be ontologically significant in a non-dual way, yes, but it may or may not have the understanding of abduction that is being put forward by these people, because 266 cases is obviously not enough to make any level of generalized conclusion about phenomena. And that's really important to know, because we only have about 8 different hypnotists writing and talking about their experiences. That's simply 8 different perspectives compared to the 8 billion people living on this planet now is a very small sample set. So compare that with Free's Beyond UFO study, and this has about 4,000 participants who have seen a UFO and had interactions with a non-human intelligence. And I just wanted to point out that there are weird things happening, anomalous experiences, and missing time is heavily reported. It's at most 50% from Denmark of the respondents had missing time. The United States is 39%, Canada 32%. So this is definitely not an uncommon experience. So what is the state of the evidence now for missing time in relation to UFO encounters and abduction? Right. So the state of the evidence, it involves witness testimony. So this testimony of the experiencer, they say, I saw the UFO, I had the missing time. We've got testimony of the experiencers, friends and family saying, yes, they had the experience, I saw them, they talked about it, whatever. And then there's other people who have witnessed what seems to be the same UFO or UAP in the area. So that's really interesting. There's also clinician testimony. So this is the testimony that a hypnotist might give about the person's character, about the experience itself, about the regression hypnosis. So there's transcripts of the regression. There's also marks upon the body, and that is things like unexplained scars, like they talked about, scoop marks, triangles. There's something called the red grid mark phenomenon that I've been exploring, and that is a very interesting marking upon the body that's somewhat associated with dreams and somewhat associated with something like missing time. So, and then there's also physical evidence. So this is like residual evidence. So there's change of an object. So that might be a UFO landing spot on the outside. There's radiation burns. There might be changes like crop circles. There might be changes of an electrical system, something like that. There's the configuration of physical objects. So that's the impossible placement of objects. So that might be the fact that you were a kid that can't reach the door. You were outside. There's no way you could got outside. The whole door was locked and nobody else opened or closed the doors, but now you're in the yard instead of in your bed. That's an impossible placement of objects. Same thing with like flipping around the clothes or getting other people's clothes and that sort of thing, and that happens. Then there's also evidence by way of new objects, such as the like implantation, like alien implants idea, or there's reference to something called angel hair that was associated with UFOs. But please do see Jacques Vallée's criticism of the evidence for ETs. He wouldn't disagree with this list, but he says that this evidence actually has a similar quality to the evidence we have had for like fae visitation, so interactions with fairies or something like that. And so there's a long-standing tradition of evidence associated with these more folkloric experiences like with fairies. So I say that we need concurrent documentation. So current evidence supports narrative testimony as a descriptor of missing time events. So, for example, a really good case right now presents a mark on the body. The experiencer shares their testimony, what's remembered and not remembered. There's the hypnotic testimony. Then someone might go to a lie detector and say, yes, I experienced this. And then there's concurrent witnesses of the associated UAP, right? So that's a great case. There might be some like radiation that you're picking up. But what is actually happening in the UFO experience, right? So we've got consciously remembered things. That's a little bit different. Then there's the hypnotically remembered thing and type of information. And that's really where we're focused, is understanding how hypnosis actually can be a source of testimony for these experiences. And I say that it is something like, because it deals with non-dual interactions, because it is not seen to be memory enhancement, there's something else happening, and that we need actual more documentation. And so one of the things that would help in this understanding is documentation of concurrent documentation. So this is not just like documentation that an event happened and that there was a before and an after, but like what is happening during the event, like what is happening during the missing time. And so that might be a video of the UFO that's happening at the same time as the missing time or something like that. So I went on a search for that documentation. I found 2 cases by asking people, mostly through Reddit actually came up with, so thank you Reddit for helping here. But there's a case of concurrent documentation by Dr. Lynne Kitei, who's a doctor. And so I'll read the abstract from her paper. An unusual event occurred in the lives of 2 respected and accomplished medical professionals. They had a joint sighting of unexplained lights, and one of them took photographs during the sighting. Afterwards, their recollection was that the sighting only lasted a few minutes and that only 2 photos had been taken. However, during the investigation and analysis of the photographs, it became apparent that there was considerable time between them. Both of the witnesses were totally unaware that there had been more than several minutes, did not believe these findings when I reported them 3.5 years after the anomalous sighting occurred. A further discovery was that the photographer had taken more than 2 photographs, which were not consciously recalled after the event, nor remembered to the day. This article presents the history of the investigation and photographic analysis that led to conclude that they had a missing time experience. So here we've got a missing time experience documented in combination with the lights in the sky. Basically. And we do have, this is something like concurrent documentation, and it adds a sense of gravity to, oh yes, there is a strong association with missing time and lights in the sky. What that is, we don't know. I don't think there was any revelation as to what happened in the missing time, nor did these people talk about hypnosis in their paper. I asked on Facebook as well, and there is someone who believes they have had alien abduction experience, and they have video of a light, it's security video of their yard. The power goes off. There's a gap in the actual counting. The seconds go from 8 to 10, and in that moment, and then there's a light that shines. and power is stripped, and there's this really interesting sound that's associated with it. This person is speaking publicly about their experience on various Facebook groups and sharing the documentation. Again, there is no sense of what happened during the missing time experience, and there's no experience of hypnosis either associated with this. And so now let's come to Dan Berg, who's the only other person I know who has concurrent documentation of a missing time event. And this missing time event happened in a CE5 experience in the Atacama Desert, which was put together by Ricardo Gonzalez. It had multiple people come, about 300 people, including the well-respected investigative journalist Paula Harris. And there was Rob Freeman with a $150,000 camera rig taking photographs of the sky and video. We've got video of Dan being called to go look at trees in the desert, which was full of thorns and wild dogs. So he was behaving in a strange way. He was the cameraman that was supposed to keep an eye on this equipment, and he left, went out to the field, saw lights that shined trees. Then next thing he remembers, he's coming back. It's much later. People are freaking out. And so we have video of him leaving and coming back. There's also video of light in the sky, which is in geosynchronous orbit above this place, that was predicted through a series of multiple automatic writings that predicted this event in accordance with the Rama mission's protocols around these things. So this is, I believe, the most documented, or this is the case that provides the most concurrent documentation at, I believe, what is an order of magnitude more than any other case in missing time. And Dan and I have had the pleasure of going on about 9 hypnotic experiences together. And this is where a lot of the theory I'm presenting around missing time comes from, and the nature of missing time. So just know that the theories and hypothesis that hypnosis doesn't lead to memory enhancement, and that it is a different relationship, a non-dual relationship to a transcendent state, comes up and out of this highly documented experience. And so we'll be going through that in a book that I am writing that covers the theories here, that goes over missing time experience and offers the basic framework of practice based upon the new hypothesis I've put forward, and as well includes case studies of 14 of my clients, including myself, and also provides a sense of ethics and etiquette in working with missing time experience, and talks about the epistemological implications of working with missing time through hypnosis. So if you're interested in getting in touch or participating or learning more or sharing your story, I'd love to hear about that. So you can get in touch with me at daniel@cosmicdreamsanctuary.org. Thank you for being here. Thank you for learning about missing time. Thank you for exploring something like the most taboo subject there is that I know of nowadays, is the missing time and hypnosis discussion, primarily because UFOs, extraterrestrials, are highly strange. We don't know how to relate to them. Hypnosis seems weird. There's issues epistemologically associated with hypnosis. Apparently, we don't understand much about what hypnosis is. And in fact, I do want to just say that of all of the documentation of the hypnotists that we've shown and investigated, only 2 of them talked about hypnosis outside of the context of memory enhancement. And those 2 were Dolores Cannon and John Mack. Dolores Cannon and John Mack. These are the only hypnotists that I know that have presented theories outside of about missing time, outside of the notion that it is a repressed trauma or something like that. that hypnosis is memory enhancement. So I really do thank you for spending time exploring these issues with me. I know it is strange, and I know it might have brought some things up for you, and I'd love to hear about that. So thank you for exploring this. Thank you for being courageous. And I hope you are courageous in sharing your own stories of missing time. One of the implications here is that we will never actually be able to speak about these things in ways that are satisfying to our personal egos. It will not be satisfying to our personal egos because there is no objective historic fact that we're communicating. A lot of times our egos want to say, yes, I'm an abductee. No, I'm not, right? This is the identification problem. There's something that's happening in between. So I'm a contactee, I'm not a contactee. This is happening, this isn't happening. And the exploration of missing time and hypnosis as something like a dream experience really situates you in this uncomfortable zone of being neither one or the other. It's actually non-dual in nature. But the good thing to know is that that sets you into capacity to relate to this beautiful blue planet, which is our Earth. It really helps you move into a more deep relationship, an integral way of relating to the Earth, primarily because you have the direct experience of shifting from objective ways of relationship, which often are exploitative, objectifying, right? We've objectified the Earth. But this missing time experience is really creating a capacity for us to relate to non-dual ways of being both oneself and the other in some way. And that's really what's invited in relating to the Earth in the future, right? What we really need to do is step out of exploiting the Earth as an object and relating to her in a way of non-duality. And so that's the journey you're going on. Thank you for participating. And with that, thank you.